This is called 140 Goats and the Shirtless Shepherd. And a couple years ago, my wife Sarah, who's here, and our one-year-old son Jackson went to spend a year on the island of Corsica to help Sarah with her field work for her anthropology PhD. So that's just a little background. The song I'll play after this is called Homesick. One day in early March, Jackson and I were called on to accompany Sarah on one of her countless anthropological excursions. We had been to the top of a lot of mountains, pilgrimages, the Corsicans call them, to participate in outdoor masses in crumbling chapels. We had waited outside museums while Sarah was given tours, outside restaurants while she interviewed someone or other, outside churches while she took singing lessons. We had gone to see cheesemakers and woodworkers, had to put on shower caps and gloves in cellars where charcuterie makers cure their meat. We had endured long and tedious dinners so that Sarah could record conversations after the wine had set in and people talked loosely. I had managed to occupy and entertain Jackson in some of the most uncomfortable, steep, thorny, arid, child-unfriendly spots in the world. Our modus operandi was to never turn down an invitation, and unless absolutely necessary, to never leave early. This time we were going to find a shepherd. I pictured a guy like Moses, an old windblown man in a long white robe full of face lines with wild hair and a wilder beard. The man who emerged from his little shack when we finally found it, however, was several years younger than me and had close-cut hair. He was strong, he was handsome, and he was not wearing a shirt. We gave the bisou, the traditional kiss on both cheeks, a custom practice between two men as well. I got more used to this as the year went on, but never quite got it right. Sometimes I planted my lips too squarely on the other man's cheek or too close to his mouth. Sometimes I let the stubble on our faces rub too much, and I never knew what I was supposed to do with my hands. The bisou was always at least a little awkward for me, and it was all the more awkward when one or both of us wasn't wearing a shirt. After the shepherd and I kissed, he invited us into his place. It was a single room with no electricity. Dried meat and herbs hung from the walls. Flies circled a sticky fly strip. He gave Jackson a box of juice and offered one to me. Jackson was delighted. I hadn't had a box of apple juice in quite some time, so I accepted the offering as well, and I took Jackson outside to see what we could see and let Sarah get to work. The door to the shack closed abruptly behind us, leaving Sarah alone with the shirtless shepherd, and leaving me and Jackson alone in a vast dusty field. We entertained ourselves for about 30 minutes or so with excitement, exploring the shelters where the goats were fed, climbing up and down on the big rocks. For a while we had a great time running around and enjoying our juice. My only real challenge was stopping Jackson from eating what must have looked like thousands of little chocolates scattered all over the ground. Eventually, though, the face of the shepherd emerged. He yodeled loudly in Corsican, I assumed, and within minutes 140 goats descended from the high hills. Jackson was thrilled. He had never seen so many goats. I had never seen so many goats. They were curious and frisky and let him pet them. I've never been an animal person, though, and it occurred to me in a frightened flash that I really didn't know the first thing about goats. I certainly didn't know anything about this breed of goats. Are they clean? I didn't know. Were they dangerous? No idea. Would they bite? Couldn't say. I didn't know the answers to any of these questions, but with my little son surrounded, just the fact I had started to even ask them at all seemed to answer enough. I needed to find a safe escape, and I needed to find it quickly and subtly, not wanting to transfer my goat anxiety onto Jackson. I weighed my choices. Sarah had the keys to the car, and I didn't think we could go back into the shack. I spotted the one raised feature in the landscape. It was a broken-down Ford pickup. It seemed like my only possibility. I moved quickly, hoisting Jackson up and into the truck bed. I set him down and then climbed in after him, relieved, standing now as if on an altar above a sea of goats. For a moment, there was something incredibly beautiful about the scene. We were safe up there. From the new elevation of the truck bed, we could see beyond the trees and the edge of the hill. All around us was the Mediterranean. It was a brilliant blue and stretched forever until it vanished into the sky. A loud banging on metal ended the reverie. I looked down and saw two of the more rambunctious hoofed beasts trying to mount the truck. The prospect of being in the confines of the truck bed with Jackson and a couple of goats didn't seem good at all, so just as fast as we had climbed up, we climbed back down, more awkwardly this time as I had to maneuver the drop with Jackson in my arms. Before I knew it, there we were back in the mess of animals. At this point, I think they knew they had me, could smell my fear. I was visibly agitated, trying to shield Jackson from the animals that were rearing up on two legs to get a closer look at us. They had driven us up into the truck, and now they had driven us back down from the truck. We were vastly outnumbered, and the goats were only getting more rambunctious the longer we remained among them. I twisted this way and that, trying to turn my back on the ones that seemed the most aggressive. Up until that moment, I had been holding Jackson in my arms, his chest against mine, his back to the goats, but this no longer seemed high enough, and so desperate to keep him safe, I lifted Jackson up onto my shoulders. I got him up there, but in doing so, I left my midsection unguarded and exposed. The goats saw their opening and wasted no time taking advantage. A frisky kid reared back onto its hind legs and nailed me with a double-hoofed punch straight into my nuts. The pain was immediate and acute. I grunted loudly, folded over, and then collapsed onto the ground. Somehow I shielded Jackson from the fall, but he cried in fear and scurried out of my grip. Upon hearing our yells, Sarah ran from the house, followed closely behind by the shepherd. He went right for his animals, stroking a few of their heads and beards and reassuring them with words that sounded half Corsican, half goat. Sarah scooped Jackson up and helped brush me off. We looked at each other. I was just kicked in the gonads by a goat, I managed to tell her in a weak and labored voice. It was definitely a low point. I looked awful, red in the face, surrounded by goat shit, covered in dust, 2 pathetic empty juice boxes beside me. We burst into laughter. Sarah was full of pity. You know, DB, she said, after we had said awkward goodbyes to the shepherd and thanked him for his strange hospitality, I could never do any of this without you. At some point on our drive back to our village, long after I caught my breath, well after I managed to get our car back on a paved road, and after I had stopped feeling sorry for myself, both Sarah and Jackson fell asleep. Looking at Sarah beside me, at Jackson in the rear view, at the mountains we were driving through, I felt a powerful surge of love for them. The incident with the goats left me feeling pretty displaced, pretty far from the world I knew, pretty out of sorts. But it was just one of many incidents while we lived on Corsica that left me reeling. Maybe Sarah was off working and I was stumped on a song, or maybe I had no music in my head at all, or maybe I was alone and trying unsuccessfully to understand the conversations around me, trying unsuccessfully to make an appropriate comment. That familiar feeling would creep in, a pit in the stomach, a restlessness. I'd long to be somewhere else. But where? It was a strange kind of homesickness, for the island was so beautiful and I had no home to return to. I had moved 8 times over the past 10 years, and as I realized this, driving away from the shepherd along the edge of the Mediterranean, my concept of home began to shift. Home was no longer where I grew up or where Sarah and I had lived the longest. It wasn't any place in the world at all. It was my family, and my peace of mind depended on them. I started imagining what life would be like on Corsica, or anywhere for that matter, without them. The world would be just as beautiful, the air just as clear and clean, but all I'd see was their absence. In that imagined longing, I got the kernel for a new song, and for the rest of the drive back to our village, I hummed the first strains of a song that would become Homesick. So we're going to do this unplugged, so you have to be even quieter than you were. Homesick is hard when you don't know just where it is that you call home. I don't know how this roof's gonna hold. It's all so cold. It's been snowing too hard, I fear. Yes, I know it's pretty here, and the air is clear, but the years aren't passing fast enough this way. Maybe you can save me now, I'm not sure how. I am calling out for that. I am crying out for that. Cause homesick is hard when you don't know just where it is that you call home. There's a place that the old man knows, where the moon sits low, where he goes to think things through. I have asked him to think of you, it may come true. Been hoping that he might wish you here today, or maybe he can lead me home. I'm not alone, I am calling out for that. I am crying out for that. 'Cause homesick is hard when you don't know just where it is that you call home. So hold me close and don't let go, 'cause through it all I love you so. I love you so. I love you so. Holy riders from days gone by, come back through time, come find me, come quickly, come hear the words I say. May the world be kind to you and Jackson too. That's all I'm asking for. That's all I am crying for. That's all I'm praying for. 'Cause homesick is hard. Homesick is hard. Homesick is hard.